We are at the Differently Abled Network meeting, and I have to say hello to all my wonderful, wonderful friends, my family, my physical and my spiritual family. And I just can't believe the responses that have been coming back about the Differently Abled Network. And it looks like you and so many other people like you really want this to happen. Well, let me tell you a little bit about the Differently Abled Network and the factor that, 2017, I went to Interfaith Community Spiritual Center in Mesa, Arizona, and I asked them whether or not they would be interested in doing a focus group and determining the feasibility of building a network that was going to reach out to veterans and other people with disabilities that were also labeled, not only labeled as disabled, but labeled as underserved. And they were very, very open to the idea. Reverend Julianne Lewis was one of the instigators in that. And I'm just so happy. And when I say instigator, I mean in many, many ways. She has been very involved in supporting what we're trying to do up until this day. If you go to the Interfaith Community Spiritual Center website, you'll see that they even have the information for the Differently Able Network on there, along with so many different activities that you can get involved with online. But let me tell you a little bit about the Differently Able Network and basically that in starting the focus group, there were many people that were very concerned about, number one, why there's so many problems out there with understanding who the underserved really are. And I noticed that in the conversations across the board, and that's from both sides of the desk, as the title of my book is, my upcoming book is that I was hearing the voices from those who are underserved, and I was also hearing the voices of those who serve the underserved, especially direct service providers. And I'm talking about teachers like myself. I'm a retired teacher, retired professor, also retired vocational rehabilitation counselor. So in those areas of looking at the underserved with disabilities was basically my passion. And so I'm listening to both sides of the desk, so to speak, and hearing that there's different perceptions of what underserved really meant. But the most common misperception, and I'll say that very, very comfortably, is that it's always seems to be the person who's laying on the street with tattered clothing and there may be some bottles or food around them that people have dropped off, possibly a cardboard sign asking for money. That this was the general impression of saying underserved. And so I learned very quickly that that was not the impression that I was getting of people who were underserved, according to even the definition from National Institute of Health. Okay, the National Institute of Health defines underserved basically by poverty levels. Okay, so if you had a certain poverty level, then you're underserved, and also by lack of access to medical care. Okay, that's another big one. But there's a lot of other factors that come into that. But they missed to me, the most important factor, and that is people who are labeled as disabled, okay, and labeled as underserved, who are not getting the services that they need, look very much like you and me. Yes, yes. There could be the person sitting next to you in a classroom, okay, whether you're teaching or in a teacher education classroom. It could be a teacher. It could be a student. It could be a coworker. That all of a sudden, this coworker, you've seen them for years, standing in the coffee line that continually goes up in prices, like it was $3 10 years ago, and now it's $6 or $7 now. But they still stand in that line. And all of a sudden, they're not standing in that line anymore. And you wonder, is it just like, do they want coffee? But it never occurs to us that that person may be going through something that labels them or categorizes them as underserved. And so when we looked at what the Differently Abled Network really was all about, it was about talking to people like you and me and making sure that we understood that the label of underserved and the label of disabled goes so much further and expands so widely that we need to keep our ears and eyes open, that it may be a friend. It may be a friend, it may be a family member that you're not even aware of, that doesn't have not only lack of medical or mental health access, but also is fallen into under the lines of poverty, under the poverty guidelines. And so this is really, really, really important. So we talked about things of starting the network with people that were having difficulty with performance at work. Okay, what did that mean? I mean, why on earth we're talking about underserved and then we're talking about people with low performance at work? Well, because it fits in, because that's one of the causes of losing jobs. And sometimes, I don't know if you've ever heard the expression, but sometimes people quit before they get fired. Okay. And I've known, and I know you've probably known, people who have worked 2 or 3 months at a time, and then all of a sudden they're in a new job. 6 months, they're in a new job again. And there seems to be a pattern. And that pattern could be very much associated with their own mental health, depression, anxiety. Okay. Not the norm of another misperception that we have is that when we talk about mental health, that we're always talking about the most severe cases of schizophrenia. Okay, which is that's not what we're talking about. When we talk about lack of mental health in the Differently Able Network, we're talking about people who deal with depression and anxiety levels. Okay, and they could be differing levels, not levels that necessarily require medication. Okay, some do, but not every time that someone gets depressed do they need medication. And I'm sure there's Dr. Jane Garcia is online with us, and I'm sure Dr. Jane would agree with that one. Well, let me finish up with just some of the reasons why people join the Differently Able Network, and that is to overcome stress issues, stress that's associated with emotional and financial crises. You see, because we look for people who are in the struggle to juggle. We're looking for a special group of people that not only are that understand that the dis in their ability does not necessarily change the person that they are. Okay, it may change the environment, it may change the way that we look at our culture, even our belief systems. I'm talking about when I talk about culture, but also I could be talking about race in the same voice, because there are differences that happen that come to mind to us many times, because we find that people of African American descent have many other higher rate of disabilities, especially mental health disabilities, than other ethnic groups. And then, of course, our Hispanic brothers and sisters also are in that category. So we look for people who are in the struggle to juggle. Okay, quite frankly, I know that's a weird term, but that's what I came up with through God's intervention, is the struggle to juggle. And what does that mean? The struggle to juggle, we're looking for people who are struggling to juggle their jobs and maybe going to school. Yes, going to school at 40 years old, at 50 years old, at 60 years old, trying to finish out a master's degree or a doctorate degree. Okay, to those who are trying to enter community college or are not doing very well on their performance at community college. So we have those that element, and then people that are responsible for their family and parenting issues. Okay, so there's a lot out there that makes it so hard. Sometimes I've worked with people who gave up their own apartment or their own home to bring in a relative, a mother or father that was suffering. And in doing that, they endured all kinds of financial crises. So we're looking for people who also have dealt with emotional and financial crises related to parenting and family responsibilities. So there's a whole gamut of how we at Differently Abled Network, which is a program of White Apple Institute, okay, how we actually deal with the calling someone or categorizing someone as underserved. And believe it or not, many of us are underserved. you'll find out from my own words that I grew up in a very underserved environment. I grew up in the projects of New York, of Bronx, New York, to Watts, California. And in growing up with those projects, I knew that I didn't want to be underserved, even though that wasn't the word then. You know, it was poverty, it was different words that they used at that time. But I knew that I didn't want to be underserved. And so I fought hard not to do that. And so, but in the interim of life and all the cycles, I land up now with dealing with the emotional and financial crisis of post-injury, post-illness. And so, interestingly, I've become underserved again. So why on earth am I trying to talk to you about being underserved? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because I've learned how to adapt. I've learned how to adapt to underserved, to being underserved, and also to the label of disabled, okay? And I would like to share that with you. And I hope that it will help you in your adjustment, number one, to a major life circumstance. Sometimes a major life circumstance can just throw us all off keel, all off balance in life, okay? Or a post-injury, post-illness situation where it's hard to get back on your feet again and you're trying to figure out, you know what, I don't even make a sandwich the way I used to make a sandwich. I don't use the toilet the way I used to use the toilet. Things have changed in my life. And for those people, the Differently Able Network, this is the meeting for you. So I welcome you this morning, and I hope that I've given you a very clear description of what we're trying to do here today. And so we have some wonderful people who have come on board. And I'll tell you, our conversation changes from time to time, depending on how many people we get in with the same issue. And one of the issues that we've been getting in lately has been about suicide. Suicide at its, and an increasing suicide. And so I looked at that, and I know that one of our emphasis is not just working with veterans, but with women veterans. And it was so interesting to me to find out the suicide rate of women veterans. And I'm going to talk about that with Dr. Jane and Dr. Jane Garcia, who prefers to be called Dr. Jane. And she will be talking to us about underserved veterans. And then I want to introduce you to our airman, Mr. Douglas Reynolds, who will bring in our next guest. Mr. Reynolds.
Hi. Welcome to the veteran feature of the Underserved Network. I'm Douglas. I'm from the U.S. Air Force retired.
Well, we sure appreciate you. Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. We appreciate your introduction. And Lori Elwood is here with us today. And we thank her so much for being here. Lori, the reason why we asked you to participate today in this conversation that's going to lead into what Dr. Jane and I are going to talk about underserved women veterans, and specifically that particular target population. But we wanted to also bring in an attitude. Well, I guess, yeah, I can't say it any other way. The attitude of family members when you find out that someone in your family, especially a veteran, because we know that we associate PTSD so much, my sister, with mental illness, with the trauma of life, and with veterans. And I understand.
Anita, if everyone could mute, we're getting a lot of feedback, and if everybody can mute if they're not speaking, that will help. So
okay,
Doug and Consuelo can mute, that would be great.
If you can mute yourselves, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's wonderful. That's probably why I was getting a little echo in my ear.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I thought it was my hearing aid again. Then I realized I don't have my hearing aid on. But you know, Lori, like I said, it's good to hear you, to hear from you, and to know your background with your brother. My understanding really affected you, and it really wasn't an issue of of whether or not your brother was a veteran so much as it hurts you that the way he died by suicide. Um, it 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 affects so many family members in such a different way. And I hear from them all the time. As a matter of fact, um, there was a statement by the American Psychological Association that talked about the factor that every time a parent is deployed, the children are impacted. Every time a soldier is deployed, there's an anxiety within the family of, is he going to come back? And I mean, these are with all first responder jobs for sure. Okay. But when you're serving the country, which you're serving people that you don't know, that are not in your community, that it makes it so much of a different thing when they go off to war, doesn't it?
Really does. I adored my brother, and when he went off to fight in not to fight in Vietnam, but as a medic in Vietnam and in Thailand, he did 2 tours, and he definitely came back damaged, but he hid it from everybody. And so,
Did you know much? I know you had said there wasn't a lot of communication between you during the time of his deployment and his return home. But even prior to that, did you feel that there was a vulnerability, so to speak, to trauma?
it was a pretty dysfunctional family.
Oh,
My mother committed suicide as well. So there was a lot. He already, was somewhat predisposed to, trauma and that kind of thing. And so after he came back from the service, he just never talked about his experiences. So nobody really knew that he had, PTSD or any of what was going on for him. And he was pretty good at hiding things.
mm.
So he didn't
I
really
find that one of the characteristics of people, that's one of the things to look for, is how people start isolating away from the things that they used to, that they didn't isolate from before. Because isolation could have been there before, but it didn't really make an impact until, of course, you find out about the death by suicide, and then all of this comes up for you. Is that right?
Right, right. I
How
had
many how many family members would you say are truly affected by someone who dies by suicide? Do you think it's just the immediate, or do you think it's the outer circle of friends and family?
it's extended family and friends. It has a huge impact on people because they don't know how to categorize that.
Yes.
Sometimes other people have guilt, even though they had nothing to do with it. And it's very easy to question, why did this happen? And what was my part in it? Could I have done something? And it's very easy to do that.
Yeah, that's a common question, isn't it? Could I have done something different, and feeling a sense of I'm not going to call it guilt, but I know some people do call it that, but a sense of responsibility.
Mhm.
Was he your younger brother?
He was my older brother, 5 years
Your
older.
older brother. So even you're feeling like, well, you're the younger sister, and maybe if you could have shown more affection, more time.
We were kind of estranged toward the end, and I will always regret that. That wasn't my doing, but still, I went through a lot of, why didn't I just push harder to get in touch with him? Why didn't I just try to make him talk to me? And I couldn't have done any of that. That wasn't a realistic thing, but that's how I felt. There must have been something I could have done,
Yes.
and there really wasn't. But
And I made sure that you felt comfortable talking about this, because there are other people here, because this is a discussion group. This is not about me. I'm not a talk show host. The far from it. Okay. This is about a discussion we're going to have. And I think there's other people that are going to want to ask you this question. So but any discomfort that you feel, do not feel that you're compelled to answer. But do you feel that, was the death by suicide similar to your mom's, or Do you think that that was a definitely a duplication of where she was?
That's a really good question, actually. Very different in the way it was done, and different reasons, but I think there was a core thing of damage from within our family and from events that happened to them around that. And, my mom never served. She wasn't a medic and didn't see all the violence and all that stuff, but she had some violence herself and a predisposition to mental illness. So I don't believe everybody that commits suicide is mentally ill. I think some
Right.
people just get so desperate, they just don't see any other choice. And I guess that's where it comes in, of being able to give people a choice,
A
being able to
choice.
say, this isn't all there is. Let me help you find something else,
Right.
It's important to catch people before they're standing on the ledge, We need to get them before they're up there
Yeah.
and let them know that there's help.
And it's funny you said that, because the way that many people have come to me about death by suicide is that, of course, women do it differently than men. Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, your brother used a weapon, a gun. Okay. Where your mother used, was it pills, or I
She jumped out of the sixth story of a hotel.
six-story room. Okay. So at that point, whatever, that must have been traumatic for you as a child. And then to find out that your brother also with that. And one of the things that's so important when we talk about death by suicide and whether we can actually do anything about it, there's really not too much that we can do. Okay. Because these things are internalized. They're internalized, my friends. And so what she said a moment ago is one of the keys that I've heard many people. We've had the American Suicide Prevention organization on it that has come into the differently able network meetings, and their system of looking at what are the signs are pretty much the same. And one of them is the isolation that I mentioned earlier, but also the choice. There's a choice here, and the choice is whether or not do I want to believe that there's hope. Okay. And hope is one of the things that distinguishes what we do from other organizations, is that we're not just listening to what people say. We're actually rolling up our sleeves and saying, how can we make this change happen because it's usually little things that usually can make this difference. And I think we have a question here. Is it Morgan? Do you have a question, or Dr. Jane, do you have a question or a comment that you wanted to make?
I have a comment.
Mhm.
I know she said that, and it's Lori.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, Lori said about hiding things. This has been part of the challenge when we are dealing with service members, because a lot of times, many times, there isn't that conversation about what the person experienced. And so in many cases, the family members are not, they don't realize the full magnitude and then the implications of
Mm,
what service actually meant to the service member.
right.
I think it is incumbent upon service members, to have these conversations with
Mhm.
their spouses, with their children, and with their families. And even if it's in small doses here or there, particularly with children,
So
in
you
small doses, you know what
small.
I mean? So that, there is some idea, because family members are totally broadsided because they have no idea.
That's what I hear. That's what I get. Yes, that just totally broadsided, more than the average family member.
Yeah.
Okay. is it because we automatically, it's the hiding is not just the hiding from the veteran or the active duty person. It's not just that. It's the hiding overall from everybody, even in the family. I'm going to hide the way I feel about you going, because I've heard that people come back with trauma, PTSD. And is that going to affect you, daddy or mommy?
Right.
Okay. And those are questions that we don't ask, we don't talk about.
No.
You know, I thought that
It's
would have made a major difference with your situation, Lori. Is talking about it more openly, especially being with your mother's background too.
I wish he'd talked more. Now, whether, I mean, like I said, I didn't talk to him for quite a few years before he died. So I don't know what he was doing, if he was going to therapy, or he was a psychiatric RN actually, and a
Wow.
psychiatric LPN,
Wow.
and worked with
Oh,
prison.
no. You know, most people may say, well, he's a psychiatric RN. I mean, he's up there. People that are on the professional level, they don't have depression and anxiety. What a bunch of BS, isn't it? You know, I was diagnosed with depression myself, okay, and took medication for many, many years. And that is something that I do not recommend medication for some people, but after post-injury, post-illness, that was something that I had to deal with. And that's why my empathy goes out for people who are right, teeter-tottering, like you said. Was it, can't remember which one of you said, when they're near the edge, that's the time to get them, when they're near the edge, not when they're at the edge.
Right.
Was that you, Lori?
Yes.
Yeah, right. And so in conclusion, that not in conclusion, because we're still on the conversation here. Lori, is there anything else that you wanted to say that you could reach out, and if you could talk to families today, which you're actually going to do, because people are going to listen to this YouTube video, I'm sure, after they see what the subject is, and what you might want to say to them. And for a minute, I'll be quiet, believe it or not.
Well, I think that the idea that you ask someone if they're okay and they say, yeah, I'm fine. And they're not, but you don't want to be pushy. You don't want to push them, and you don't want to be obnoxious, but you want to be the friend, but you can't give up. You can't back off. So it's finding that balance of how do you keep checking in with them and encouraging them without getting them so upset they don't want to talk to you. So finding that ground where you can just mention it. And even if it's to say, you don't have to talk to me, but let's find someone, let me help you in any way that I can. And I wasn't around to do that for my brother, just because of the circumstances. But I wish I had pursued more with trying to get in touch with him. So,
and I appreciate what you're saying with that, because one of the most common things that I hear, and I'll just say it the way that it has come across many, many times, is, do you think I'm crazy or something? Okay. And it's like, crazy has taken on such a negative connotation, from crazy being, gay or joyous or whatever, like, somebody shaking their head in joy or whatever. And people calling that crazy, depending on the culture that you're in. Okay. Because culture has a lot of impact on how we see the word crazy. But crazy has the negative connotation, and there's no way around it. And so, but it doesn't have levels. And that's what we want people to know, is that, okay, if you want to use the word crazy in association with mental health, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that. I'm not saying that that's wrong, but I'm saying that at least be aware that there are different levels of mental health. That when you're talking about mental health, and I'm depressed because I broke up with my boyfriend, okay, yes, you're experiencing depression, but does that mean that you have depression, severe depression, where it leads into you taking medication in order to get through and learn how to adjust your life around it, and to eventually adapt to a world of dealing with your own depression? Dr. Jane, anyone have any other comment? I think we have another person there that has a comment there. Oh, are you crazy? Yes, a lot of people do use that term, are you crazy? Um, and that's unfortunate because we even use it in the movies and the media. And so, unfortunately, you have to adjust to the fact that that's part of society. And thank you very much for acknowledging that, person in chat. Okay.
Can I say the other part, but just the other brief part of that is
Oh, sure.
to continue to encourage them and so forth. But at some point, you can't make them seek help. And if you take that on and then you start getting down because you haven't been able to convince them, that's a fine line. You've got to be careful that you take care of yourself in the
Mhm.
process of trying to help them. So you can, lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. You can just do what you can do.
Wow.
And so you have to take care of
Encourage
yourself as well as them.
So in not hiding your feelings and discussing your feelings and the encouragement that you continually give to that will avoid a person to you said not getting to the point where you aggravate them and that they don't want you to come back in their life
Right.
anymore.
Right.
Okay. And that comes back to that statement that many people say, about being crazy.
Right.
And so we want to know, and I'll say this is that I get crazy with my grandkids. Okay. I've got 6
Me
of them.
too.
I get crazy with them. So if crazy is such a negative word, we do use it in a positive tense also. Okay. Are there any other ways that we use crazy? Anybody else got anything else to say about crazy? Okay. You get, oh, how about Morgan? Are you right about crazy dancing?
100%.
Uh-oh, uh-oh.
100%. But I do have a comment on, I think I agree with Lori when it comes down to discussing and also just promoting vulnerability, but not only does it strengthen, I believe, my friendships, my relationships when we talk about our feelings, but it also prevents just isolation. At the end of the day, we're not on this planet to be alone. I mean, that's why it takes two to make one. So at the end of the day, I totally agree with just in promoting vulnerability and just talking about it is really important, especially at my age. Like I think it's really isolating when we hold it in.
And she's a Gen Z. Yes, Gen Z, talking to baby boomers. Some of us are baby boomers here, talking about the same subject.
Yeah.
Okay. And the similarities of how it is from generation to generation to generation. Okay. It doesn't really change. The words change. Okay. Sometimes the connotation, the meaning changes. But basically, the moon is still white. The sky is still blue. The sun is still yellow. I mean, there are basics that we accept in our worldwide society. And one of them is about mental health. One of them is about suicide. Okay. Death by suicide or commitment of suicide, as many people say, like the person that I love very much committed suicide. They're trying to move that into death by suicide to put it more under an umbrella of medicine, okay, which or mental health, which gives it more clout and understanding and research money. Okay. All right. So moving right along here, we don't want to miss our time with the artists and musicians, but we have Dr. Jane Garcia, who's going to talk to us a little bit about women veterans. And let me just preface that as we take this few minutes, Dr. Jane, we started a little late today, so if we go over a little bit over 1 o'clock and everybody has to shut down, and we just appreciate that they participated today. There's a lot of people that participated today, and I'm really, really happy to see that. But can I just tell you a statistic that came to me from Disabled American Veterans, which I'm a lifetime member of, and I'll tell you, I was very astonished by this statement. And the statement was that women veterans are twice as likely to die by suicide than their male counterparts. I was cornered by that. And then also 3 times more likely, okay, than to do the same with those in society. So 3 times more likely than civilians to die by suicide, civilian women. Now that statistic was, and that's 2024, that's this year. So this is a new statistic that just came out. And I was floored by that. And I just want you to know, before Dr. Jane takes a minute to absorb what I said just now, I just want to take a minute and let you guys know that in order to get in touch with us and in order to join the Differently Able Network, you need to go to www.whiteappleinstitute.org. Okay. And when you go there, you'll see the membership tab, and click on that and put in your $6. And no one is ever turned away. We have a general membership, and that doesn't cost anybody any money. That's where you get to listen to what we're doing here. But for additional benefits, like time, specific time with a mentor, that kind of thing, that requires that we work out a payment plan for you to be able to become a member of the Differently Able Network. Of course, we need operating costs, okay? But anyway, if you don't feel comfortable writing to us and going to the website, feel free to call us, call or text us, call or text your question. Okay, these questions that we asked today were questions that were submitted to 888-56-APPLE. That's 888-562-7753. Now we'll get back to Dr. Jane Garcia. Dr. Jane, what was that statistic? Did that shake you up a little bit?
You know what? Hi, everybody. Yeah, that's a high stat.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna quantify this number of women veterans and why that's such a high number. And
okay.
Whenever I talk about women veterans, I always quantify it for people so that people know the amount of women veterans that we're actually talking about and how it numerically within the population. So I have 100 people in general. So this is the US population, right? There are 100 people. Out of that 100 people, 10 will be a veteran, right?
Okay.
Veterans make 10% of the US population.
All right.
Out of that 10, only 1 will be a veteran. Right now, the number is like 1.5. Only,
you mean a woman veteran?
Yeah, a woman veteran. Only 1 or 2 may be a veteran. And we are a very small minority. And yes, and so women veterans is literally a minority within a minority.
Minority within a minority. And Dr. Jane, I meant to preface your to do an introduction to let people know why you have this passion. I mean, you are a woman veteran yourself. Tell us just a little bit about you and what you do, please.
Okay, so my name is Dr. Jane. I am a women veteran. The reintegration process I feel like it's finally completed after all this time. And I served in the U.S. Army for 10 years. I did 3.5 in the reserve and then 6.5 on active duty. I absolutely loved being a service member.
Yes.
But then I also realized that, it's such a different culture as we make that transition, right?
Yes.
And so what does that transition look like for women? Because now, remember, when you talk about that definition for underserved is not having the resources, services that are available.
Right.
But why would society have resources and services available for individuals who is a minority within a minority? And so it comes down to knowing that we are present, that we do exist, because a lot of times people are shocked or amazed at women veterans. Oh, you actually served? You know
Oh,
what?
yes, I get that.
Yeah,
Mm,
we are not dime a dozen and we're really an anomaly, right?
mm,
So because we're so small in numbers, it is essential that we let people know that we do exist.
mhm.
You know what I mean?
Right,
And
right.
so currently I teach at um I teach at the college level, and
Mhm,
my doctorate is in cognitive psych. I'm a psychologist
mhm.
um and a researcher.
Yes, you
And
are.
so yeah, so my research really focus in the veteran space, um
Mhm,
because then I will say this every time I talk about the veteran community. The veteran community, I feel like people are called to serve different segments of the population. And because we're called to serve different segments of a population,
mhm.
we're passionate about this particular cause or that particular cause or whatever. I am comfortable in the veteran space, serving the veteran community, because I can do this until I die.
Right, right, right,
The
exactly.
veteran community, what we experience, not just impact ourselves, but it impacts the household.
Mm,
And when you think about women veterans, the way how society is structured, right? So, social structure, women are usually the caregivers within the society,
yeah,
within the family unit and the family structure. And so, there you have this woman here who has difficulty with her own self and trying to care for others, because then the way how society is structured, women are generally caregivers.
mhm.
And so the statistics that you gave, it
Yes.
it makes sense. It makes sense in terms of when you think about the idea that women veterans, because they are, I don't want to say mandated, but because they are, for the most part, caregivers
Mhm,
within communities and within their families, um, we also have to realize that how much load are they really carrying in addition to their own that they must carry?
I think that that's where the key comes in, is because, when I listen to all the reasons of hopelessness, of substance abuse, of mental health, which are across the board, shared with the civilian population, okay? But there is a difference, as you noted, in the woman veteran and her leadership role, in a sense, because it becomes, because of her caregiving and nurturing characteristic of most women, and I'll just put it that way, that her children, the people around her, look towards her for leadership. I know that in my own family, because I'm an Army veteran, that there is a sense of acknowledging a strength within me, and I'm sure that that has, I know, just even looking at you, and some people I think will share this, that there's a sense of strength within you, a strength of commitment and strength, and even pride in who we are as women veterans. And I think that definitely makes an impact on how much it hurts when we lose, when we slip, and we're not able to hold on to the hope. Do you agree? Or did we lose Dr. Jane? I think we lost Dr. Jane there. Okay. Well, we're gonna move on. Dr. Jane had some interesting things to tell us also about the factor of the highest rates of suicide among non-Hispanic, Indian and Alaskan Native women veterans, which is very, very high. Those that live in rural areas, that makes a big difference too. Not only not having access to resources, but also being so far away that even if you know that there's an access going on, a meeting or a group meeting or whatever that's happening, it's hard to get to that and to stay committed to that. So there's a lot of different reasons why people lose hope. And when they lose hope, what the Differently Able Network is trying to do is restore hope. So I hope that you'll help us by making sure that you go to our website and see what you can do to support our work. Okay. Well, before we close here, we have something very special that we do at the end of every single program that we're dealing with. And that is that we introduce the differently abled artists and musicians. Okay. And we did our veterans feature a little early today as we talked about suicide in veterans, and Dr. Jane came on. Now we have this part of the program that's really important. And Lori Elwood has agreed to co-produce, and she picked out something that to me, it's going to be a surprise to me, my friends, because it's called Steel in the Spine. And I'm going to ask that I be made host again so that I can share this. And did we record this meeting? We did?
Hey, everybody, I'm here. I'm back.
Okay. Did we record this meeting? Uh-oh.
I don't know.
Oh, she did. Oh, it was recorded. Okay. All right. Can you make me co-host again so I can put this on? So Dr. Jane, while we're coming to some closure here, I was talking about how some women veterans living in rural areas and also our Alaskan and Native American sisters who are they say, even with that statistic that I read, that they are at the highest rate of suicide also. Okay.
Yes, because being in a rural community presents its own challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So one, you have the rural communities, two, you have those cultural differences.
Mm-hmm.
And when we are dealing with indigenous populations in particular, it is hard to move back within to our own communities because now we've had all these different experiences.
Right, right.
And so they are trying to exist in a world that they knew before, but the service member doesn't really realize how different they become through the military and the process of militarization,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we absolutely underestimate that. So I have, and actually I wrote this down. I know Lori talked about, briefly mention a couple of these things, but I'm going to talk about it from a different perspective, right? And so, yes, you can call the person, but what service member understand is the word commitment, right?
Yes, we do.
And,
yes.
Yeah, and so it's framing it for them. You know what? Let's go ahead and make a commitment to speak with each other once a week and write it down. As opposed to say, you know what? Let's talk once a week. Because words are powerful and the way how things are framed is also important.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Good points. Good points.
Yeah. And so, because as service members, we honor this or we appreciate this term called commitment. Okay, then let's use that term. You know what I mean?
Dr. Jane, just so we know that how time is, we've got about 3 more minutes left, just so you'll know.
Okay. The other thing that I said, write it down for them, and so that they can put it on their refrigerator,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
The other thing that, service member, because it's the family members understanding that we speak a different language, right? And so, because certain things are drilled into us during the process of militarization.
Mm.
Okay, so let them know, when they say you have to man your sector, right?
You have to
You
man
have
your
to,
sensor, that's right.
yeah,
Be
you
aware,
have to man,
you have to be aware,
yes. And
okay?
so you have to be aware, but you also have to, there is a certain responsibility. Remember that word as one of the core values, responsibility.
Yes.
So how are you, what sector of this battlefield are you responsible for in the
Mm.
campus structure?
Oh, that's powerful what you said. What portion of the battlefield? And that applies when you're a veteran, when you're transitioning. I see what you mean.
Yes.
Yes.
So they
Wow.
have to know, okay, it is my responsibility, because remember, that's one of the core values for service members.
Yes.
And so it is my responsibility to make sure I speak to such and such at least once a week. Right? Because then it is my responsibility to ensure that that I meet the needs of my family, even if that is an emotional need. And
Mm.
so it's letting the veteran understand that their presence matter and they're important. And so part of that is them understanding the responsibility that they play in the not economic, but in the emotional stability of their
Mm.
household.
Very,
Not
very.
just, yeah, because it's not just the economic stability. If it was just enough for us to have a job, we would not be having this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. You're right. It's not, and a lot of people do think that get the veteran a job, get the veteran a job, or even, with the population I work with, the underserved overall, which inclusive of veterans who are underserved, that is a common thing. Get the job. And I'm like, well, how can you get the job if you haven't looked at all aspects, the physical, mental, spiritual, cultural, all of
Yeah.
those aspects of what makes the human being and what has happened to that human being in service.
Yes. Right? And
What
so
good tips can you give us in closing here?
so those were the two big ones that I have. Make an
Wow.
agreement, and instead of using an agreement, you can say, our commitment to each other is we will talk once a week, or we will talk once every 2 weeks. What is your responsibility as a member of this family? And what is, part of your responsibility is an emotional stability, right? And so because that is part of your responsibility, your presence is required.
Wow. Wow. I mean, that's so powerful for anyone to listen to when we talk about, what could I've done differently? Well, let's not wait until we're asking the question, what can we do?
Right.
What could we have done differently? Let's listen to what we can do now in the present
Right.
moment. And that's what you gave us just now, which is, I think, one of the most powerful things that I've heard in any kind of suicidal discussion about suicide, period.
Yes.
So thank you
And
so much. It's so applicable. And Lori, I know, I can just imagine you must have a feedback on that.
I do. I mostly want to tell you that Chaplain Tony is here, and he's been here, and I wanted you to know that he's around
Oh,
to
well,
do
thank you. Thank
these
you. Well, we
things.
definitely want Chaplain Tony to close with us this afternoon. And we want to make sure that after Chaplain Tony, that we are able to close the whole program out with the spine of steel. okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
And what Dr. Jane said is really powerful. I mean, she elaborated on what I was saying in a very clear way, and I appreciate that because a specific commitment and a specific connection, that's a wonderful idea.
Thank you
Wonderful.
so much. And my
Well,
last thing, my
Yes.
last thing was to be connected. And
Oh,
Lori
yes.
mentioned this. You know, if you're not going to talk to me, that's fine. But be connected with a veteran community or be connected with a spiritual community. Because then, you know, it doesn't have to be, oh, we're going to church, we're this, we're because spirituality looks different for all of us.
Mhm.
You understand?
Yes.
But it's being connected to a community, because then the more connected a person is, the more likely that their transition will be successful, the more likely that they will not commit suicide. And I don't know what the stat is, I'm sorry. But the more connected a person is, the more the attempt of suicide goes down,
Yes.
because
I
then they are
definitely,
connected.
without a doubt, in my 40 plus years of doing this, I can definitely attest that that is very, very true. Once we get the person connected into some type of community, and I do want to say, as Dr. Jane and I have begun to open up our hearts and minds to the fact that we know that many of the problems that many of us as veterans have were there before we went in service, okay? And so they were never addressed in life, and maybe not addressed in service. And so after service, with becoming underserved and becoming and a post-injury, post-illness type of thing going on in your life, that everything is exacerbated. Everything is more and more and more. So when we talk about 3 times more likely, I can see 3 times more likely being susceptible to suicidal ideation, suicidal ideas. And that's what we want to stop by being connected. So Dr. Jane, wow, thank you for a powerful, powerful discussion. Any other comments that we have before we bring on Chaplain Tony Manuel? Because I know that he has some, he's got to have a comment. Dr. Chaplain Tony Manuel, are you there? Can we get his comments before he starts playing the horn? Because I want to tell people why you play that horn, man.
Ready?
And why, are you there, Chaplain Tony? Yeah. He hasn't come on yet to say hello yet.
He's muted. I don't.
Okay, Chaplain Tony, you're muted. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
All
Can you hear
right,
me?
there you go. There you go. We got to make time for you. So we're a little over the time right now.
Okay.
Okay. We started a little late due to technical issues, but we're here now. And
Okay.
we definitely want, my dear brother, we want to hear from you. Number one,
Yes.
we know that you support women veterans, okay? Because
Yeah.
you've been supporting for years now. And brother, we really appreciate you for doing that, because we
Oh.
need more veterans to understand that there are some differences that need to be addressed.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, but to preamble the song, the commitment. I loved what Dr. Jane said. But inside of us, being a chaplain, I recognize that I'm created by God, and He created within us the ability to love ourselves. It gets clouded, but He says, "Love thy neighbor as I think you should be." No, love thy neighbor as you love yourself.
Wow.
And what happens is the grace love is allowing that to come forth, which God has created within all of us. It gets clouded, it gets muddied, it gets seeing through a glass darkly as we do now. But there comes a time when you can reach in for that, which is God Himself, because He put that in there syllogistically. You can reach in, bring that forth, so you can reach out to get the commitment within yourself to reach out to those that are around you to help. Dr. Applewhite, you and I have had a conversation when I wasn't feeling the brightest or on top of the mountain. I do recall that. And you helped walk me through that, the process. Well, the process is there all the time, and learning to bring that forth, allow that to come forth, and love yourself, allow you to love yourself the way to learn to love yourself, the song says. So whenever you're ready, I can go ahead and play just a little bit of that because I know we're out of time.
I
But
just want to
I
say,
think it's wonderful. Go ahead.
yeah, I love what you said just now about love thy neighbor, and because we have people of all different religions and different Bibles that they
Mhm.
attest to. I know for a fact, from the Bhagavad Gita to the Mormon Bible to the Holy Bible, that love thy neighbor as yourself is a common theme throughout all of them. So I mean, even though you're giving us a Christian perspective, which, and I don't even, I can't even call it that. I think it's an overall God perspective. And I appreciate that you brought that to our attention, because that comes back to what Dr. Jane was talking about the connectedness. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Oh, you're
So
welcome.
please let that horn blow and let us understand more about how music can help us to get through and build that connectedness.
Okay.
Build that connectedness to God. You agree?
I agree,
Right,
yeah.
right. Okay. Morgan, who's a Gen Z, definitely agrees with that.
I agree.
And I think
Okay.
Airman Reynolds agrees. There you go.
Can you hear
Airman
me?
Reynolds too. And this is Love Yourself by I think Mariah Carey, or which one does that this song? Do we we're having some challenges here. There you go.
Can you hear the horn?
No, we're not hearing it clearly at all.
Okay. What button do I push on my phone to hear the horn? I just got through playing the song.
Okay.
Hello. What do I hit here?
Okay.
Okay. What do I hit? What?
What do
Technical difficulties. Hello. Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Right, there you go.
Testing.
Take
Just
your time. Take your
can
time.
you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that?
Right. And I was
Say
asking,
yes.
yes.
Can you hear that?
Absolutely. Is that Whitney
Give me a
Houston?
thumb.
Is that Whitney Houston that sang that
Yes,
song?
Whitney Houston.
I thought so.
Yes, the greatest love of all is
Oh my
learning to
goodness.
love
Oh,
yourself. Let yourself love yourself.
all right.
Let you love yourself.
All right.
Reach out.
Captain
Do what you
Tony
got to do to
Randall.
take care of yourself.
Army.
Are you ready?
That's right.
Are you ready?
Go Army.
Go on.
It's breaking up a lot. Huh? Chaplain Tony, we're not getting any sound here, so we're going to move on.
This is the glitchiness of Zoom.
Okay. We appreciate him. Okay,
There. Did you hear that?
okay,
Some of it.
it can, we'll let you know later. We'll let you know later, but we thank you for your time and your effort that you put into that song. And we'll practice on that later on the sound and how the sound effects worked out. Okay. So thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
We're gonna ask Lori to tell us a little bit about Steel in the Spine and introduce that, and then we'll close. Lori, why
Okay.
or what did you pick out that song?
Well, this was written by a dear friend of mine, Daniel Nahmad, And he wrote this song, wasn't written about me, but about a friend of his who he was a very successful person, and he knew her and she's wonderful, happy. He had no reason to believe she had any kind of issues. And then one day he found out that she had some major things in her life, and he was astonished. But he wrote about how strong she was and how she managed to get through her life and not let those things end her functionality in life, that she moved forward. And the first time I ever heard the song, it could have been written for me, and a lot of people have said that. And so
Oh.
it's just a remarkable song by a remarkable musician.
When you first told me about it, I have steel in my spine myself, and when you first told me about it, I thought that was what it was all about. But it's a much deeper meaning than that.
Yes.
And so, without further ado, we'll go ahead and put that on, and we'll thank you. We'll thank you all very much for joining the Differently Able Network today. And we hope and pray that that we'll continue this work, and make sure that you have any questions and ideas about your own post-injury, your own post-illness, after a major life-changing event, and you feel isolated, and you feel, or someone who has any of the things that we've talked about today that apply in some way, make sure you give us a call and let us know how we can reach out and help them. Okay?
Everybody,
care.
please make sure you're muted so that we'll be able to hear this.
Okay, please.
Tony, if you can mute, that would be great.
Thank you.
Steel in your spine, Daniel Neymar. And this time he's going to have a piano in front of him.
Hello. Another new song. This one inspired by a growing realization that most of us, most of the time, do our best to emulate normal. Do our best to appear fully functioning. Put on a brave face, a smile, I'm fine, how are you? But that it doesn't take much digging beneath the surface to find right in front of you or me a survivor, someone with guts, someone with perseverance, someone with pain through which they have battled to arrive where they are. So it's really intended to be a song about compassion and connection. And you may relate to it in one direction or the other. And it's on my new album. The album's called Real. The song is called Steel in Your Spine. Here we go. Thanks again. Never understood how you turned out so good with all that you've had to endure. No one expected you to make the best of you. The deck stacked against you for sure. The more that I learn, the more I admire how you never burn, being forged in the fire. There's an ordinary mortal that quit by now, with a life like a field full of mines. Oh, but you must have steel in your spine.
There's a lot of lag.
We talked about when you first figured out that you'd have to go it alone. Breaks my heart to picture you, a child hiding out of view, so young to fight on your own. But still here you stand, and still here you are, igniting the world with your luminous heart. Yeah, I know you know. Just say that child has a lot to be proud of, but no longer sees the world that day. You were mortal, should have quit by now. You've been counted out so many times. Have seen, but your life was so a smile. You must have steel in your spine.
Without further ado, we close our differently abled network, and I don't think there's anyone that could listen to that particular song and not feel a sense of this solidifies everything that we've been talking about today. In addition to the wonderful job that that chaplain Tony Manuel was trying to do with his trumpet today. And due to sound effects, we didn't get all of the sound, but we got at least, we know that we understood what Chaplain Tony was trying to get across to us today, to love thyself as you love thy neighbor. And we thank Dr. Jane Garcia. Dr. Jane, thank you so much for being here this morning, all of you this morning. If I say all of your names, then I'll miss somebody. So just know that this is Dr. Danita Applewhite signing out. And I thank you very much for joining the Differently Abled Network, a program of White Apple Institute. Learn more about us at www.whiteappleinstitute.org. And thank you so much again. Thank you, Ms. Consuelo Estete, for being here. Such a longtime supporter. Yes, and that kiss is for Lori, I think, too. I'm gonna end this meeting. Okay, Lori, I think you have to end the meeting. We need to stop recording. We need to stop recording. There we go. We need to stop recording at this point. Okay, I can't seem to shut off the meeting right now.
I'll call you back, Mom. Call me back.
Okay.
Call me back, Mom.